Good day, everybody. My name is David Dart, and I'm a CCI trainer with Layer 8 Training Incorporated. We are a Citrix authorized learning center. And today we're going to be presenting you a webinar on the XenApp and XenDesktop application layering, the Workspace Environment Manager, and some additional optimizations that we have available to us within the current XenApp XenDesktop 7.1x environment. Layer 8 Training, who I've been glad to be associated with for the last 4.5 years, is one of the largest, or is the largest, I should say, Citrix authorized training partner, or CALC, in the North American market. And last year we were honored to receive the CALC of the Year award from Citrix for the work that we do with them. Currently on staff, we have 5 Citrix certified instructors. 4 of them are Master CCIs. Master CCI has been shown to be top of the line when it comes to instructional delivery and participation in the creation of Citrix product trainings. We collaborate a lot with Citrix on course development, NetScaler, XenMobile, as well as the XenApp and XenDesktop components. In addition to that, we also offer components in VMware, NetApp, Juniper, Checkpoint, etc. As I mentioned, I am a CCI. I'm also a Master CCI. I was awarded that 2 weeks ago at the Citrix CCI Congress held in Texas. I am certified to teach classes from the XenApp XenDesktop, virtualization and networking, XenMobile, NetScaler, as well as additional courses in Checkpoint, Cisco, as well as Microsoft products. So kind of a well-rounded trainer for you here. Today we're going to talk about the XenApp and XenDesktop components, i.e. in the 7.1x components that have been released in the last year. We're going to focus on the 7.13, which was released in February, but there's 7.14 and 7.15 are also out. 7.15 is called the long-term service release, and it was released in August of this year, August 18th to be exact, just a couple of weeks ago on the system. Each of them has their own particular features that they enhance the deployment of your XenApp and XenDesktop component, and you can look to get a new one every quarter. Citrix has been very good about releasing new versions rather than feature packs and updates in the system. So for instance, 7.6 had several feature packs that came out to add in additional components, as well as fix any bugs that may have cropped up in the deployment on the system. Some of the things you'll see in the newer versions are some enhanced installation options, in particular migration. So they've made it easier to migrate from a XenApp 6.5 environment to the 7.1x environment on your system. So they've made it much easier to roll those out. Also, updating is very, very easy in the system. It's a one-button click to update your systems from the one version to the next. I just did my 7.12 version to 7.15 just the other day. We've got some application disks. We'll talk about that one. The application disk gives us an alternative for deploying out the applications rather than putting them on the base images in the system. The localhost cache came out not too long ago. The localhost cache is a replacement, substitution, whatever you want to call it, for the connection leasing option. With the localhost cache, you'll see this one growing more and more popular as time goes by. And in 7.15, they've done something to show how important it has become. We still have supplemental grace period licensing. We've got the new authentication methods for your users in the system, the federated authentication service. We've got the self-service password service, the reset that integrates with the storefront component. But today we're going to focus on 3 particular components that have been released that will make your deployment much more efficient, your users happier, and in the long run, hopefully, you're not having to do as much work, right? So we're looking at Workspace Environment Management, application layering or app layering, and then cloud-based deployments on the system. We'll close the day out with the cloud-based deployments for your system. The the localhost cache, this one's replacing connection leasing. And what you saw with connection leasing was each of your delivery controllers would cache brokered connections on the system. So there would be a cache on your delivery controller for any connection that had been brokered within the last 2 weeks. And then in the eventuality that your SQL server went down and you don't have high availability configured, the connection leasing would then at least allow users that had previously logged in to get back into their resources. New connections would be precluded from this, as would random desktops. So there are some limitations on what the connection leasing would allow you to do. With the localhost cache, we changed the way that the high availability is provided on your delivery controllers. It's more robust, it's immune to corruption than the earlier versions of the localhost cache because it's not the same thing. With the current version of the localhost cache, the delivery controllers will maintain a secondary broker function or service on the system and a SQL Server Express local database that will be populated from the primary database on your system. And the system will check every 2 minutes and ensure that they are in synchronization with each other. The default prior to 7.15 was to use connection leasing. Now with the newer version, when you come in, the localhost cache is going to be the default. And I just installed a 7.15 environment just the other day, and if you'll notice on the screen here, you're going to see that the localhost cache functionality at the top of the screen is in a disabled state. So this is false. And then if we go down to the bottom here, you'll see the localhost cache. This is now enabled as true. So this is now the default on the system. So that's some enhanced functionality when you're looking at the high availability on the system. Now, as always, this should not be a replacement for high availability, but only used in the event that you do not have the wherewithal to actually deploy an always-on availability group or a mirror system. So just a couple of options that you have on your system. When we're looking at application deployment, some of the enhanced, or Studio, I should say, with some of the more enhanced features that we have the app disks that are out on the system. The app disks may be supplanted by the AppLayering. I've heard some issues on that, but the app disk allow you to create an additional disk on your system to deploy out your applications in a separate container from the underlying base image on the system. This way we can take one app disk and apply it to multiple catalogs and delivery groups within the system. So when you're looking at your delivery controller in the system here, you would see the delivery controller, and on your Studio you would see your app disk, and you would then come in and create an app disk on the system that has your system. Now, I don't have any catalogs that can actually support it on the system because of the way they're created. I need more servers within the system in order for that to actually work. So we do have that functionality within the system, so you can do that in your environment. We've got some new restart notifications. We've got some application folder optimizations. We've got application tagging and keywords that have been added in there. So now we can create our own keywords in addition to the built-in keywords that have been available previously. We've got enhanced delivery group configuration. So if you have a delivery group of, say, 20 servers, we can take those servers and create multiple restart schedules so that even number of servers reboot on Monday, odd numbered servers reboot on Tuesday, and your prime numbers will boot on Thursday. We can also tag the servers so that we can minimize the number of servers that may be supporting desktops. So if we have 10 server machines and we only want to give out server desktops on 4 of them, we can tag them and then assign those desktops to delivery groups for specific use, utilizing those tags on the system. So we've got some additional options for when we're deploying out the resources and the desktops inside of the system, which will give you some more options on the system. Now, with the primary 3 components that we're going to briefly introduce to you, we have the Workspace Environment Management option. This is WIM. WIM is a software solution that you deploy, and it will utilize resource management and monitoring and configuration, as well as user environment management, monitoring and configuration from a remote system rather than using GPOs for these. So many things that we define using a GPO, such as removing the start menu, removing the control panel, things like that that are usually done through a Windows GPO, we can put into the system using an agent, and this will then configure it for your system. This can improve the performance of your VM and the logon times. For instance, they've done some benchmarks, and an average desktop loads between 45 and 60 seconds. With Vim installed, you'll see a huge improvement. The logon will now be about 15 to 20 seconds because many of the GPO options do not need to be loaded in the system any longer. So this is going to help your deployments receive optimizing on the system, application response time, as well as getting the best possible logon performance for your users. One of the options you can use is also the resource management, where you can prioritize applications for access to the resources within a session. So if an application becomes idle, we can remove CPU and RAM resources from the idle application and give it to the one that's actually running. So with Vim, we've got some use cases for Vim inside of the system. This is going to be where we can do some CPU management when you want to control the CPUs on your servers, memory management, process management, some environmental settings, Microsoft USB settings, UPM, which is a really nice toy. We no longer have to do the Citrix user profile management settings inside of a policy. We now do it on the agent. And we can do some fast log off. We'll look at that one. Fast log off allows you to come in and deploy or log the user off immediately and not wait for back-end processes to be configured on the system. The Vim is easy to deploy. There's very little you have to do when you're deploying the Vim on the system. You create a couple of things. First thing you'll install will be an infrastructure broker. So you're going to create a broker. You're going to install this on one of your Windows Server boxes. The broker will be connected up to a SQL Server database that will hold the information and the settings that you configure using an administration console that has been installed on a machine. Once these are installed, you then install the agent host on the machines that you want to monitor and control via the infrastructure broker using Vim on the system. Once these have been in place, the system will then allow you to come in and utilizing the Workspace environment management. This will then allow you to come in and set some of your configuration settings that you want. So let's take a look at some of the things that you can do utilizing the Vim environment. When we're looking at the Workspace environment option here, let's get rid of this guy here. We're looking at a console that allows you to connect up to a site, and you can configure multiple sites for monitoring on the system. In this case, we've got a default site already set up. Once you have your site set up, you can then come in and set up administration. You can define who your administrators are going to be on the system, who are the users that will be monitored on the system, as well as what machines have agents. Now, in this case, I've got two machines that currently have agents installed on them. And we're looking at the machines will be synchronized. So a lot of the settings have already been synchronized out to the agent for when the users log on to the system. Well, some of the options we have when we're looking at this, we have some actions we can define in the system. So we can define specific applications we want users to have. So we can bring in an application and a name, do a command line on the system, and so we can decide what the user can actually do for applications in the system. We can define printers. So rather than using a GPO, we can define some printers in the system. So add in a printer, we'll do the printer name, we'll look at the target path, and lo and behold, now the user has a printer without a policy. Same thing on network drives and virtual drives on the system. We can actually bring in some registry settings. So if I need a specific registry setting for a user, I can come in and bring this in, as well as environmental variables in the system, what ports, INI files, file system operations, etc. We can create some filters on the system, so when users are coming in, we can add in a filter that's going to do specific things. We're going to be looking for specific rules and enabled or disabled for the users. Assignments, we can assign certain components to the users. System optimization, this is where we can look at the machines and we can choose to enable fast log off on the system. So when the user logs off the system, it will automatically log the user off, and all the additional tasks that happen at log off will happen after they've logged off. And we can exclude specific groups if we need to from that. We can manage the CPUs on the machines. So we can prevent CPU spikes on the system. And so when the usage reaches a certain limit, we can have some spikes, and we can exclude certain processes from this on the system. We can prioritize processes on the system, so we can add in specific processes on here. We can look at some CPU affinities, as well as some CPU clamping options. Same thing, we can look at memory management, I/O management on the system, as well as some process management for this environment. We can also look at the policies and profiles, and this is where we start seeing a more comprehensive way of replacing some of the Windows GPO components, as well as the Citrix policies here on the system. So we can process some environmental settings on the system. We can hide programs. We can hide the help, the find option, turn off the computer, the system clock. So we can, when the user logs on, these will no longer be seen. When we look at the desktop on the system, we can hide the computer icons, the recycle bin, system properties, etc. Windows Explorer, what's going to happen with the Windows Explorer? Are we going to allow them to access registry editing tools on the system? Control panel, what are they going to be able to see on the control panel? So on the system, so we can add in the applets that we want them to have, etc. So we have options. We can also do the USV, the user state virtualization configuration, so we can set their Windows roaming profile, any RDS profiles on the system that we need on the system. And then the big one is now we have the Citrix profile management. So we would not need to go into a policy within Studio or GPO and enable profile management. We could now do it here. So we could enable the profile management. We can process groups. We can set excluded groups. We can define how the profile is going to be handled within the system. So how are we going to handle the user's profile when they log off? Do we want to delay the profile log off on the system? So how do we want to handle the log off? So let's say we delay 5 minutes. Do we want to enable the migration of existing profiles into their system? What do we do with local profile caching? If you've worked with the user profile management, you'll notice a lot of they're very similar to what we had inside of the profile settings in policies. So we could just say delete the local profile. We've got some advanced settings where we can look at the number of retries. We can log components on the system. We can look at the registry. You can do a backup. So when the user logs on successfully, the system will create a backup. So if it ever gets corrupt, we set our streaming options. So we can come in and we can do some configuration of the user profile manager right here rather than using profiles. So it will replace those particular settings. And we can do some VMware persona settings on the system files and folders that we want to include on the system. We can look at configured users, some transformer settings. So do we want to enable transformer for your environment? Some advanced settings on the system. We have some cleanup actions. So when the user, do we want to delete any desktop shortcuts, agent options? So on the system, where do we want the log file to go for the system? So we have some options when we're looking at WIM. Now, one of the things when you're looking at WIM, you also have the ability to come in and monitor. So you can look at the logon report, you can look at the boot report, user trends in the system. I haven't done anything, so you're not going to see anything. User and device reports, and some configurations on your system. Now, when you're deciding whether or not to deploy WIM, you'll want to take into consider other components that may be doing the same thing. So if you have other software strategies that are going to do the same thing, you want to avoid any conflicts on the system. So this is just one way of providing you with some advanced optimizations within your environment. The other one we've got, the other area which is causing a lot of excitement for a lot of people, is the app layering on the system. With app layering, we deploy some additional components within your system, one of them being the ELM. and you then create layers to provide a home for your various components in your system. Your operating system is in one layer. Platform layers are going to include platform tools, your Xen server tools, your VMware tools, etc., which can also be in the OS layer. Your application layers can be separated out for various types of applications. Microsoft Office, Adobe Reader, QuickBooks, Peachtree, so you can have a different application in each layer, and then you layer these for your users on the system, and you can mix and match your layers. So one group of users might only get the operating system, the platform, and Microsoft Office. Another group of users might get the same OS layer and platform layer, but only get QuickBooks. So you can change the way you do it by using what are called templates. We can also create what are called elastic layers, which gives you more of a granular control on the application layers for what users can launch what, when they can launch it in the system. So once you have your infrastructure in place, and the infrastructure here is relatively straightforward, you're going to import, if you're doing an on-premise, you'll import your enterprise layer management, your ELM component. This is a Linux box. It's going to contain two storage medium, a 30 gigabyte and a 300 gigabyte storage medium. The 300 is going to be the repository. The repository is where your layers will be stored, as well as your layered images. So these will be stored on the repository on the system. Once you create your layered images, you would then use your hypervisor to create additional machines for deployment via your MCS or provisioning services. Once you've deployed your enterprise layer manager, you then come in and you log on to the console, and this is going to be a web user interface on the system. You'll log on to your console on the system, and this is going to show you your system, and you'll see some options for your system in the environment, your configuration, your management system, your layering services in the environment. All of these will be controlled via your console. Well, the main thing we want to look at are going to be the layers. So when you're looking at your layers, you're going to see your operating system layers. And in this case, I have two separate operating systems using the Windows 10 as the base. They have different configurations and different hardware settings. Once my operating system layers have been created, I will create a platform layer. The platform layer is going to include the tools. You'll join your system to the domain, etc. Once that's done, we create our application layer, and this is where you start coming in and create multiple application layers in your system. So I've got a quick demo here on creation of your operating system layer. It's a video because it takes about 20 minutes and we don't have that much time in the webinar. So I taped it, and I will go ahead and show this guy here. Let me see if I can get it to pop up here. Let me get it here. So this is going to show you how you would do your Windows system. So this is going to show you how to do the Windows system within the environment. So you'll create your gold image. In this case, it's a Windows 10 system. I'll fast forward this. You'll come in on the system and you'll install the gold image tools on the system. This is a very short process. You're then going to come in and you're going to set up some optimizations of your .NET framework. So you'll set up your .NET frameworks in the system. You'll then come in and optimize the machine. You're going to rearm this. So using your scripts folder within the setup, you're going to come in and rearm it for KMS. So you'll set your KMS version. This will create a script for you to use. You'll then come in and run some optimizers and then a setup script to get this guy configured for your environment. So we'll come in and optimize this guy, save it, good to go. We'll then, there's our optimization script. You'll see that this was created just the other day. So we'll come in here. This is going to go, we'll zip through this guy. So you'll shut it down. So there's the machine. You'll shut the machine down. I'm going to take a snapshot of the machine just to give me a backup on the system. You'll run through this guy here. You'll then run the Citrix AppLayering image preparation utility, which gets the image ready for the deployment on the environment. So this is now going to get the machine ready. We'll shut it down. We'll then go over to the ELM manager. We'll give the system a name. So we'll define the Windows, the system by the name, what version is it, the layers we're going to use on the system. Once you do that, you define what your connector is. The connector is defining your connection to the hypervisor. Very similar to the host connection inside of a studio. So in this case, it's going to be Xen Server. This is going to open up a new page where you'll define your connection. Now, if you've already done this, this page won't show up. You'll just automatically see your system. So you define your Xen Server address, the username, and the password you're going to use on the system for the environment. You'll then choose the machine that you want to clone. So use secure or non-secure connection. You'll test your credentials. You'll then choose your VM. So in this case, we're going to use the desktop DTP003. So we'll choose the virtual machine on the system here in 1 second. There we go. So we're getting it, going. So we'll give it a name. So we're going to select our VM. So we'll just pull down the list. It's reading from the connector and saying, okay, well, there's the VM we're going to use. And then we do some icon assignments, and we'll confirm and complete this guy on the system. We'll create a layer on the system. And you'll notice it's going to take a little bit of while, but you'll notice right now, it's kind of hard to see, it says not deployable. So this machine's not deployable. Once the system goes through the process, we'll just go right on through to the end here. The system will say it's duplicating the layer, 76% complete on the system. We'll go through, and we're almost done. So now my system is deployable and ready to go on the system. And if I open up the properties on the machine, you'll see some properties for how the system was created. So if I look at it, if I go into the machine here, and let's say I look at the Windows 10, I want to right click on this, I'll look at some of the properties, and this will show me some of the properties on the system. Is it deployable? What's an audit history on the system? So did anything happen during the installation of and the creation of the OS layer? Once you've done that, we then come in, you create your platform layer, same thing on the system. However, on the platform layer, you're also going to have an option that says finalize on the system. If we look at the properties, we'll do the same thing. Is it deployable? So in this case, we have two versions. So we have version 1 and version 2 on the system. So just a little side note on this, make sure you do a GP update on all your systems before. If the system calls for 2 reboots, do 3. Then we create an application layer, and we do the same thing. We create an application layer. These all are also going to need to be finalized when you're done. So we can look at the properties on here. It'll give you some remedial efforts that you may need to do in order to deploy it. For instance, on the Microsoft Office, if we look at the properties, there are going to be a couple of components here that are saying, you know what, this layer might not be able to work because of this particular item on the system here. So it's telling you that there's an elastic fit problem for the system, and this has to do with some of the OEM files that are on the system. Once you've done that, you've got your layers. You then create your image templates, and so you create a template, and this makes it publishable. So when you do the template on the system, I'll go ahead and look at the properties on this. You're going to see that this is my Win10 MCS. You'll see the layers that have been assigned to it and what versions have been assigned on that particular machine. Once the image is done and published, you'll then see on your hypervisor, you'll see a machine that has the name of the system and then the date and time that it was created. So this would be my base image. So when I would go into, say, Studio on the system, this would be my base image. So if I were to go into, say, Studio and look at my machine catalogs, you're going to see that I got a catalog here on the system, and this catalog was created from the AppLayering system. So if I look at the details, you'll see that the master image is the Win10 MCS. So this is the machine that was actually used as the source for the MCS image in the system. So this gives us some options for how we want to do it. And if we did some updates, we would go in and it would create a new image, and we'd use that new image for the update image when we wanted to go into the system. So this is going to give us our app layering functionality within the system. So this gives us some nice new tools to work with. The other thing you might want to look at, and we already talked about the various options on the system here that you'll see for the your components, and you'll see the template in the environment. The other option that you can now use, or it's becoming more and more prevalent in the system and much more user-friendly, is going to be the cloud. And in this case, we're looking at the Citrix Cloud integration options. These are alternatives when data center costs are becoming exorbitant and you need to find some alternative to that, or you need to scope out your system but you just don't have the wherewithal to do it. You're looking for better security standards. You don't have a redundancy. You wanted automatic updates on the system. We can now put these in the cloud. So this gives us some flexibility inside of the system, and when you want to do your cloud, you just come into the system and you take your on-premises components, in particular your control layer, and you put your control layer in the cloud, and this will have your delivery controllers and your components here. And the nice thing is that some of the updates are going to be automatic. And you then you can then put your Netscaler gateway in the cloud, your storefront in the cloud, so you have options for how you want to do this. And when you want to deploy out your cloud deployments, you log on to the Citrix Cloud, and I've already done that, so let's take you over to the cloud here. When you look at the cloud, you'll log on with your credentials for your company, and you'll see all the options you have available to you for your cloud deployment. There's our Citrix AppLayering, which can also be deployed in the cloud. Some smart tools as XenApp and XenDesktop on the system, so you can put these on the cloud. We've got some other available services that we have. Netscaler Management Analytics System, which is a feature for Netscaler. Secure browser, share files, and mobile service on the system. All of these can now be hosted in the cloud. So if you don't have the data center to handle it, you can just go ahead and put this in the cloud in your system, and that will make your life a little bit easier. So that concludes today's webinar. I want to thank everybody for coming in. On the system, we'll do a quick Q&A answer on the system. If you're looking for more information on any classes for the system, you can go to our website at layer8training.com. That's layer 8, the number 8, training.com. Or you can email info@layer8training.com and request information on specific classes. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope to see you in one of our trainings.